How ReadSpeaker assists with the UDL guidelines. This webinar will cover the following: who is ReadSpeaker, the ReadSpeaker Advantage, a quote, some data, the CAST guidelines, which is UDL or Universal Design for Learning, and a demo. ReadSpeaker is more than just a text-to-speech company. We offer many accessibility tools. On the slide here, we're going to talk about 4 very important things and then discuss the 25 in the center of the screen. We have over 250 voices in 65 plus languages. We use voice actors to create our voices, and as I like to say, we slice and dice up the recordings of the voice actors so we can produce each sound. Once that is done, we can customize your dictionary to pronounce words the way you want them pronounced, or names, or put in reading rules for acronyms. ReadSpeaker is just simply easy to use. You just click and listen. It's that easy. What's good for some is good for all. When you talk about UDL, the Universal Design for Learning, it benefits every person, whether it is required for that person or not. It makes it easier for everyone to learn. ReadSpeaker provides accessibility tools, and we're compatible with many proctoring software solutions. Now the 25. It's our birthday. We're 25 years old this year, and that tells you how long we've been in this market, which is a long time for a text-to-speech company. This next screen is about the difference between all the free tools out there and ReadSpeaker. When you have a free tool, many times you lack support. There are very few, if any, guides to help you figure out how to use it. The voices are very poor quality, and you don't know which item, app, extension, whatever, to use when. With ReadSpeaker, everything is in one place. You have support. There are written guides and videos available. Our voices are human-like. We just talked about that. So you don't need to make a choice of which app. It's just there. Let's look at the ReadSpeaker Advantage. ReadSpeaker has seamless integration. Not only are we a certified LMS integration, but it's easy implementation. Sometimes it is adding a JavaScript to a theme. Other times it's adding a block. Other times it's simply having our customer ID number added to your LMS integration. For websites, it's simple. You add the JavaScript in your CSS file. Alternative formats. In today's age, learners like streaming audio. Not only is it synchronized with the highlighting, but it's quick and easy. When you download an MP3, which we also offer for those that prefer it, it can many times take a little bit of time to download that MP3. It's a huge file. We also offer an optical character recognition, or OCR, which is great for those inaccessible documents that are giant images. It will OCR the text that is on the page. Finally, enlarged text. Now, you might not think of enlarged text as an alternative format, but it is, because enlarged text can be combined with reading speed to help second language learners, to help learners who are trying to get the gist of something that is difficult to read. It is not only for those that have some visual difficulties. Accessibility tools. As mentioned before, we have synchronized highlighting, and with synchronized highlighting, this allows the learners to associate the pronunciation of words with the written word, building a better understanding of what's going on. This is called bimodal learning, and that is essential to retain the bulk of what you're learning. Abraham Lincoln once said and I'm paraphrasing here, when he reads something aloud, first he sees it, then he hears it, and therefore he remembers it. The same with synchronized highlighting. Note-taking highlighters with collection. We have a highlighter with 4 different colors and borders. So if you are colorblind, you can also use these highlighters. You can use it for note-taking, categorization, whatever. You can also download your notes so that you have them to study by. Text mode. Why is text mode an accessibility tool? First, you pick your font size, your font, your color background, the space between characters, all of those type things. You're customizing it to what you need to receive that information. Quizzes and proctoring solutions. We work with all the major proctoring solutions or platforms that are out there. First come to mind are Respondus, Honorlock, Proctorio, and there are many more. This gives voice to the quiz assessments that learners are taking. Human-like voices. We discussed this a few minutes ago, and we mentioned that there are over 250 voices, 65 plus languages. We offer customization, and it can be on websites. I had the pleasure of hearing Dr. Aisha Haynes speak several times, and she is an assistant at the University of South Carolina Center for Teaching Excellence. And in her talks every time, she always tends to ask a question in some form of why should you make your materials accessible? And she gives you a moment to think, and then she says, there are laws, and we don't want lawsuits, so we follow the laws. But the biggest or main reason is it is just the right thing to do. That has stuck with me as I have learned about UDL, WCAG 2.1, 2.2, all the different W3C guidelines. They have all struck me, but I go back to what Dr. Haynes said. It's just the right thing to do. Smarter Balanced Assessment Consortium conducted a study in 2020 of 3rd through 5th grade students who have individual educational programs or IEPs. Assessments were given in 3 intervals: days 1 through 4, days 5 through 8, and days 9 through 12. And if you look at days 1 through 4, you see that the highest they got correct on their assessments was 40%. And they did not have a text-to-speech solution provided during that time frame. In days 5 through 8, they did have text-to-speech provided, and you'll notice that they scored between 60 and 70% correct. In days 9 through 12, text-to-speech was no longer provided, and you can see that the students dropped back down to 40 to 50% correct. This is important because it's saying that text-to-speech is giving them that bimodal learning. And even though this study was done for 3rd through 5th graders, you can find similar studies where we tracked 9th graders as they entered and their assessments. And there are many other studies out there. Text-to-speech is essential for bimodal learning. Now, there has been a lot of talk about the DOJ ruling that came down here recently. Attorney General Merrick B. Garland stated in a recent article that the latest effort to ensure that no person is denied access to government services, programs, activities because of a disability. By issuing clear and consistent accessibility standards for state and local governments' digital content, this ruling advances the ADA's promise of equal participation in society for people with disabilities. Let's think about this. First off, Web Content Accessibility Guidelines, WCAG 2.1 AA, was passed in June of 2018. This ruling requires web content and mobile apps to follow WCAG 2.1 AA, and not only was it passed, they put some teeth to it by adding a compliance deadline. Now, we all know when we have timelines for doing things, there are consequences if you don't make the timeline. They have not spelled out the consequences, but those consequences could involve money or lawsuits or who knows what. We would just have to wait and see. Not only is it learning management systems or LMSs that require the compliance to WCAG 2.1 AA, but now websites and mobile apps must also meet that responsibility, that level of accessibility. So how does this and the CAST guidelines align with where ReadSpeaker fits in? So first, let's talk about the CAST guidelines for Universal Design for Learning, which we will call UDL. Now, they are divided into 3 categories. You have engagement, which is the why, representation, which is the what, and action and expression, which is the how. Within each one of these 3 categories, there are subcategories of access, build, and internalize. So to me, this is how the student is receiving the information, internalizing it, and learning from it. Now, WCAG 2.1 AA, which is done by W3C, has 5 categories: perceivable, operable, understandable, robust, and conformance. And when you look at those 5 categories, you see that they're working hand in hand, because the perceivable and the operable are going directly to how to present the material so that the students can receive it. The understandable, the robust, and the conformance gets down to the technicalities of how you go about getting that material the way you need it. Now, we can go a lot deeper than that, but let's keep it on the surface here. Let's go to the next step of how does ReadSpeaker fit into this. The first thing that I think about is in engagement, you want to reduce the distractions around the student. And that can be done lots of ways in a physical classroom, but when you're in an online classroom, you've got to think about it a little bit differently. And with that, we have some, as we say, non-sexy tools. And those are things like a page mask, which is cut a hole in a sheet of paper and move it up and down on the page. A reading ruler, which is just a note card. But we also have text mode and enlarged text. With text mode, not only are you choosing your font size, your font, your color background, and all that good stuff, but you can also narrow it to your eye width so you're reading straight down. So it's kind of like putting blinders on to the information that is to the left and right on the page. Now, another thing is the enlarged text. You might be saying, why enlarged text? How is that reducing distraction? Well, one, it's very large at the bottom, so it draws your eyes to it. Number 2, if you slow the reading speed down by 10 to 15%, second language learners can then grasp the words better because they're looking for an accent typically toward the end of the word, where in U.S. English, the accent is toward the beginning of the word. So they're seeing all of the word, not just up to the accent, before the highlight goes on. So it's really drawing them into that material. You're going to see more about this as we go to our demo shortly. ReadSpeaker settings allows you to decide how you want the material visually to appear on the screen. You can adjust highlighting colors, text colors. You can adjust your reading voice so that it's a voice you find pleasing. Change it up when you're getting burned out. There are disabilities that relate to voice, and I'm not talking about being deaf, but there are other disabilities such as panic attacks that can occur when certain voices are heard. If you've had spousal abuse of a male and female, then a male voice may cause a panic attack, or vice versa. Another thing is if you have some hearing loss, but you're not deaf, a voice might sound like Charlie Brown's mom. You hear it, but you can't distinguish it. So there are lots of things that go along with choosing voice. So we want you to have several voices to choose from. There are many more ways that ReadSpeaker fits in these categories. But now let's move to a demo, and you can see how ReadSpeaker helps all learners. I first want to present ReadSpeaker in a learning management system. In this particular learning management system, we're going to look at settings. So, click on the hamburger, the 3 horizontal lines to the left of the Listen button, and then click on Settings. Now, you can choose your word and sentence color. I prefer a high contrast. For those that are colorblind, you can use the underline for one and the first 4 colors from the left for the other because they show as a shade of gray. Adjust your reading speed by clicking on the speedometer and using your up and down arrows. Adjust your text mode settings by clicking on the 2 A's with a gear, and you can choose your font size. We'll choose a +2. Our font, and you should choose your font of comfort. So Arial is my font of comfort, but I'm going to use Comic Sans just to use something different. And now choose your color background with text color. A lot of learners like light blue on black. That's great if you're not blue-black colorblind, which is a common color blindness, or black on light yellow if you've got headaches. My preference is black on light pink. I can put space between the characters so that if I'm having some decoding challenges, I have a little bit more space to do that decoding. And decoding is not just a disability. It could be you have allergies and you've got tears in your eyes, or you may need to see your optometrist and get new glasses. Now I'm going to put it back on Arial for my comfort. And now I want to talk about the idea of putting blinders on. Earlier I mentioned you can put blinders on by adjusting the width of this box, and I'm doing that by pulling and pushing on the diagonal arrow in the lower right, and I want it the width of my eyes. With that, I am now able to ignore what's outside it. One other thing we offer is keyboard shortcuts to where you can program these the way you want it. You click on the X, click on the box, and then put in what shortcut you want. Let's close this out. And now let's look at voice. When I look at reading voice, I have lots of different voices. This is an international course, so it has more voices than normal, but I have lots of different voices to choose from. And the English voice that I have is Kayla, which is selected. Let's listen to a line by Kayla. Highlight the line, click listen.
There are other learning resources around you.
We set things up for text mode, which reduces distraction, so let's look at that. We now have that information, and I'm going to highlight a single line and click listen. If I wanted to hear the entire page, I could use the play button at the top.
You must first figure out how to learn.
If you don't like your settings, you can always change them on the spot. Another thing that we mentioned that ReadSpeaker helps with is the ability to have enlarged text. Let's take this third paragraph, and we're going to turn on enlarge text from the hamburger, toggle on enlarge text, and click listen.
There are other learning resources around you. If you have a research paper, the databases can be overwhelming. Ask your librarian for assistance. Your librarian can not only help you learn how.
Now, notice that it's loading up to a comma or an ending punctuation. Again, you can make this larger or smaller, but your eye is drawn to this, and that reduces distraction. You've got bimodal learning going on because the word is highlighted as you're reading it, and as Abraham Lincoln said, when you have both, you tend to remember it better. If I click stop here, I do have to go back and toggle it off. We mentioned page mask, so we'll turn it on, and you can see it is simply a sheet of paper with a hole cut in it, the electronic version, making larger and smaller. Now let's look at a document. First, with a document, we can see that we have the pages as thumbnails or as headings, but that takes up a lot of space, so we want to remove that. And we talked about a page mask a minute ago. We also have a reading ruler, which is nothing more. Notice I can move the page or the ruler, nothing more than a note card, which can be made larger or smaller. Now let's talk about the highlighter, which we mentioned in the ReadSpeaker Advantage. We can click on the highlighter, we can click on a color and highlight something, but that's a pain because every time I want to change colors, I've got to go up, change color, and go back and figure out where I want to highlight. But I can use the arrow, highlight what I want, and pick my color. And I'm just going through picking all the colors so that we have them up here. We now have all the colors on the screen, but if I'm colorblind, that is a problem until I show borders. This gives the colorblind student 4 unique borders so that they can have 4 markers. If they were working on paper pencil notes, then they would not have those 4 colors. They would have to figure out how to set up some type of borders there. These can also be collected and downloaded. We mentioned voice. Of course, we do have other voices here. Let's listen to a line using Jack.
docReader is used for reading many Office, EPUB, and PDF files.
And to hear another voice, let's use Bridget.
Distracted readers will find the page mask tool and the reading ruler tool to be especially beneficial.
So we have lots of different voices, and you can listen to them. Your voice should always match the language on the screen. If the document is written in Spanish, you should use a Spanish voice. If the document is written in English, you should use an English voice. Now let's look at a quiz. As you can see, we've already answered one question, but each question has its own player. In several of our LMSs, that is true. In others, it's one player, and you would need to highlight and click Listen. Important things to know is we remove the dictionary, translate, and download to MP3 in many of our LMSs to promote academic integrity. Now let's go back one more time, and we're going to look at a document that is a giant image. When I click on the document, I can see I have a document. I open it with docReader. This tells me that there isn't anything readable on the page because it's a giant image. And do you want us to try to make it readable? So I'm going to shrink that back down, and I'm going to say yes. Now we know there were words on it because we saw it beforehand. It is now readable, so we're going to read the first sentence. So I highlight the first sentence, and I click Listen.
This guide will discuss the various tools available in ReadSpeaker Speak Up.
And that voice was Kayla. Now let's transition to a website. We are now on FactSite, which has individual topics covered. And in FactSite, you can see we have the Listen button, and we can click on it. We see we have the same settings for voices. We have voices for it. All the tools that we had before, we still have. And the beauty of this is it fits everywhere. So not only can you read inside a learning management system, you can also read websites. And this brings up what the DOJ is saying. With websites, they have to be accessible. And part of accessibility is being able to present the material to where the learner, which is the everyday person, can learn. And that means they may be dyslexic and they need text-to-speech. They may be an audio learner, so they need to hear it in order to comprehend it. Not only do you have to design the page in an accessible manner, you have to look at these other challenges that our students face. That is where ReadSpeaker comes in to help bridge over that hurdle and remove it from being the obstacle that it is. The student can then listen. The student can then use a page mask. The student can then change voices. The student can then do so many things that help them. So as you're looking at your websites, text-to-speech needs to be an important part of it, but not just text-to-speech. It needs to be text-to-speech with accessibility tools that are movable around the page so the student doesn't always need to go up to the top. It needs to be part of the page, not an overlay or an extension that you're using. Let's go back to our PowerPoint. Would you like to learn more? If so, we can get you a free demo account. You can test your learning management system or test on a website for a certain amount of time. We just need a little bit of information, which is at the bottom of the screen. Your name, your institution name or website name, who your LMS or website administrator is, the URL, and what language or languages you want. For more information, contact Paul Stisser. His email is paul.stisser@readspeaker.com, and he is the Vice President of North American Education. Or Colleen Sandquist, whose email is colleen.sandquist, SANDQUIST, @readspeaker.com, and she is the Strategic Partner Manager. This video was created and narrated by Ginger Dewey, who is the Educational Development Manager. Follow us on Twitter and LinkedIn, and you can get more information at www.readspeaker.com/education. Thank you for attending this webinar.